Deep forests have always held a strange kind of power over the human imagination. Long before cities existed, before roads cut through the wilderness, people whispered stories about the things that lived beneath the canopy, creatures that were never meant to be seen, watching from the shadows between the trees. Today, we're diving into one of the strangest and most talked about encounters ever caught on camera, a story that begins with a simple hike and ends with something that still can't be fully explained. This is the story of the man who found something in the forest that he was never supposed to find. It started on an ordinary autumn afternoon in a heavily wooded region known for its hiking trails, dense undergrowth, and a local reputation for strange happenings that most people brushed off as campfire tales. A man in his late 30s, an experienced outdoorsman who had spent years exploring similar trails, set out alone with nothing more than a backpack, a walking stick, and his phone tucked into his pocket for photos. He had done this hike a dozen times before. He knew the terrain, the landmarks, the rough shape of the trail as it wound deeper into the woods. Nothing about that day felt different, at least not at first. About an hour into his hike, he began to notice something odd. The forest, which was usually alive with the constant chatter of birds and the rustle of small animals moving through the brush, had gone completely silent. Not quiet in the peaceful sense, but silent in a way that felt unnatural, as if every living thing in the area had simply stopped and gone still at the same moment. He later described the feeling as being watched, though he couldn't explain why. There was no visible threat, no movement in the trees, nothing to point to. Just an overwhelming sense that he was no longer alone. He pressed on anyway, chalking the silence up to nothing more than coincidence, maybe a predator passing through the area that had temporarily scared off the smaller wildlife. But as he continued deeper along the trail, he noticed something strange near a cluster of fallen trees just off the path. At first glance, it looked like a shadow, an odd patch of darkness where there shouldn't have been one, tucked between the roots of an overturned tree. Curiosity got the better of him, and he stepped off the trail to get a closer look, phone already raised to record. What he found next is what has made this encounter so widely discussed. Nestled in the hollow beneath the tree roots was a creature unlike anything he had ever seen. It was low to the ground, roughly the size of a large dog, but its proportions were all wrong for any animal native to the region. Its limbs were too long and thin for its body, bending at odd angles that seemed almost insect-like rather than mammalian. Its skin, if it could be called that, had a strange grayish tone that seemed to blend seamlessly into the shadows around it, almost as if it had adapted specifically to remain unseen in low light. Two large, dark eyes reflected the dim forest light back at him, unblinking, fixed directly on his position the moment he stepped into view. For several long seconds, neither of them moved. The man later admitted that his first instinct was to run, but something about the creature's stillness kept him rooted in place. It didn't lunge, didn't growl, didn't show any of the aggressive posturing you might expect from a cornered animal. It simply watched him, its head tilting slightly to one side in a motion that felt disturbingly deliberate, almost thoughtful, as though it were studying him the same way he was studying it. He managed to keep recording throughout the encounter, capturing nearly 2 full minutes of footage before everything changed. In the video, you can hear his breathing grow heavier, his footsteps shifting slightly as he tried to back away without breaking eye contact with the creature. It was in that moment, as he took his first real step backward, that the creature reacted. It didn't attack. Instead, it let out a sound unlike anything he had heard before, a low, guttural clicking noise that seemed to come from somewhere deep in its throat, rising and falling in a pattern that almost resembled speech. It repeated the sound 3 times, each time slightly louder than the last, before going completely silent again. That silence, he said, was the most unsettling part of the entire experience. The clicking stopped, and the creature simply stared at him for a few more seconds before turning and slipping backward into the hollow beneath the tree roots, vanishing into a space that, by all logical measurements, shouldn't have been large enough to hide something of its size. He checked the hollow afterward, once he found the courage to approach it again, and found nothing. No tunnel, no burrow, no sign that anything had ever been there at all, aside from a few strange indentations in the soft earth that matched no known animal track in the area. Shaken, he made his way back to the trailhead as quickly as he could, checking over his shoulder every few steps, convinced that something was following him through the trees even though he never saw it again. When he finally reached his car and reviewed the footage, he realized just how strange the encounter truly was. Later analysis of the video by several independent enthusiasts noted that the creature's movements didn't match the biomechanics of any known regional wildlife. Its joint articulation, the way its limbs bent and moved, was inconsistent with mammals, reptiles, or amphibians native to the area. Some pointed to the possibility of an undocumented species, an animal that has simply managed to avoid detection due to its apparent camouflage abilities and reclusive nature. Others leaned toward stranger explanations entirely, suggesting that what he encountered wasn't an animal in any conventional sense at all. What makes this particular case so compelling isn't just the footage itself, but what happened in the days that followed. The man returned to the same trail roughly a week later, this time accompanied by two friends, hoping to either debunk his own experience or find further evidence to support it. They brought better cameras, flashlights, and even a thermal imaging device borrowed from one of their friends who worked in construction. They reached the same fallen trees, the same hollow beneath the roots, and found it completely empty, just as it had been the first time he checked. No tracks, no disturbed earth, nothing to suggest that anything had been living there recently. But as the group prepared to leave, the thermal camera picked up something unusual roughly 30 yards deeper into the woods, just past the edge of where the trail curved out of sight. A heat signature, roughly the same size and shape as the creature the man had described, hovering near the base of a large oak tree. By the time they turned their regular cameras toward the spot, whatever it was had already moved, slipping just out of frame before any clear footage could be captured. The thermal imaging, however, remained consistent for nearly 10 seconds, showing a shape that behaved unlike any known animal, moving in short, jerking bursts rather than the smooth, continuous motion typical of most wildlife. This second encounter, brief as it was, added an entirely new layer to the story. It suggested that whatever the man had found wasn't an isolated occurrence, a single strange animal caught out of its usual hiding place. It suggested the presence of something that had been living in that stretch of forest for an extended period, undetected, moving with a level of awareness and evasiveness that felt almost intentional rather than instinctual. Local residents, once the story began to circulate, came forward with their own accounts. An elderly man who had lived near the forest for most of his life recalled hearing similar clicking sounds echoing through the trees on quiet nights, sounds he had always attributed to insects or unusual bird calls, never once considering that they might belong to something else entirely. A woman who frequently walked her dog along a nearby trail described her dog becoming inexplicably agitated near that same cluster of fallen trees on more than one occasion, refusing to walk any closer no matter how much she coaxed him, eventually turning around and pulling her back the way they had come. None of these accounts proved definitively what the creature actually was. No physical evidence has ever been recovered. No clear photograph exists beyond the shaky, distant footage captured during that first encounter, and no scientific team has ever been able to locate or study the creature directly. But taken together, the story paints a compelling picture of something living in that forest that remains, even now, completely unidentified. Skeptics have offered a range of explanations, from misidentified wildlife suffering from disease or injury that altered its typical appearance and movement, to elaborate hoaxes designed to generate attention online. Both explanations carry some weight, and neither should be dismissed outright. Hoaxes involving supposed cryptid encounters are unfortunately common, and animals suffering from conditions like mange or severe malnutrition can appear far stranger than their healthy counterparts, sometimes taking on an appearance that seems almost otherworldly to someone who doesn't recognize the underlying cause. But those explanations struggle to fully account for the clicking vocalizations, the unusual limb articulation noted by those who studied the footage closely, and the follow-up thermal reading that seemed to confirm something was still present in the area days later. What continues to draw people back to the story, more than a year after it first began circulating, is the sheer ordinariness of how it began. This wasn't a story that started with someone actively searching for something strange, hoping to manufacture an encounter for attention or notoriety. It began with a man doing something he had done dozens of times before, on a trail he knew well, in a forest he had walked through countless times without incident. The mundane nature of the setup is exactly what makes the outcome so unsettling. It suggests that whatever this creature is, it doesn't require some remote, unexplored wilderness to remain hidden. It can exist quietly within reach of ordinary hiking trails, coexisting alongside human activity for who knows how long, simply avoiding detection through instinct, camouflage, or perhaps something closer to genuine intelligence. The man himself has been notably reluctant to return to that trail since the second encounter. In interviews given shortly after the story gained attention, he expressed a mixture of fascination and unease, describing the creature's eyes as the detail that has stayed with him the most. Not the strange proportions of its body, not the clicking sounds, but the way it looked at him, with what he described as clear and deliberate awareness, as though it understood exactly what it was doing when it chose to reveal itself rather than remain hidden the way it clearly had been for who knows how long before that moment. Whether this creature represents an undiscovered species quietly surviving in a pocket of forest overlooked by science, or something far stranger that defies easy categorization, one thing remains certain. The story serves as a reminder of just how much of the natural world remains unexplored, even in regions we consider familiar and thoroughly mapped. Forests have always kept their secrets well, and every so often, they offer just enough of a glimpse to remind us that not everything living beneath the canopy has been cataloged, named, or fully understood. So, what do you think really happened in those woods that day? Was it an undocumented animal finally caught on camera after generations of successfully avoiding human eyes, or something else entirely, something that defies the categories we typically use to make sense of the natural world? Let us know your theory in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more strange encounters from the edges of the unexplained.